face the sun, taste the rain, savor healing, touch your pain, to take the middle road is to live not at all. You'll know love once you feel it all. Ride the wind, sink in the sea, holler rage, practice peace, to take the middle road is to live not at all. You'll know love once you've lived it all. Have no fear, you'll find love. Have no fear, you'll find love. Be together, be alone, walk in circles, seek the unseen, to take the middle road is to live not at all. You'll know love once you feel it all. You'll feel love once you've lived it all.
Hey guys, it's your host, Vinyl Man Jebb, with the Jebb and Green podcast. Today I have Willie Wisely with me. How you doing, Willie?
Hey Jeb, hello.
Hello. How's your day going?
It's better now that I'm talking to you, man.
Perfect, perfect. All right, cool. So we just introed with your song "Face the Sun." If you want to tell us about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was a song that was written for first of all, backing up a little bit, I had my whole new album completed, mastered, done, sequenced, and then a friend called and said, "Hey, I have a client who wants a song written for him, and I want you to write the lyrics, and here's a chord progression." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Well, and is it?" And he said, "It's a complete buyout. They're gonna own it. You know, you'll never see any royalties. It's not part of your catalog and all that." So he sent me these chords on the piano, and I hacked them up a little bit and moved them around a bit. Then I sat in my car for 3 hours in a California parking lot waiting for my daughter to get out of gymnastics, and I came up with those lyrics and was like, I don't know that I can give this song away. I'm really liking this message. And so I called my writing partner, John Strawberry Fields, and said, "Dude, I don't think we can sell this." And he's like, "Well, whatever. And he produced it up just sweetly, and I threw in my 2 cents, but he just really did a great job. I recorded a lot of backing vocals and stuff, but he really did all the instruments, and it finished so well. I'm like, we can't get rid of it. And he's like, okay, let's keep it. And then I'm like, in fact, dude, I think this is the title track to my record. I'm gonna have everything remastered and resequenced.
That's awesome.
And put that on it. Yeah, so that's the story. So you got to be careful when you're working under contract, because you might fall in love with your baby, or it's more like I was a surrogate mom, and oops, I fell in love with a baby.
Oh no, I can't give it back. No, it's interesting because I look at the facts of like posting as a DIY artist, nowadays, and it's like, I'm hoping to get, up there and doing stuff in studio, and it's like, it's good to know, like, hey, sometimes you got to be careful because you might, fall in love with the song that you've written, or it's like, because I put, I think artists in general like to put in a lot of work to everything we do,
Mm-hmm.
So it's great. So what artists have inspired you to make music?
It was really like. I'm old enough now where this story changes because different things. I'm reminded of distant memories every now and then, and I suddenly recall. I always tell the story like, oh well, I was over at my friend's house. I was 14 years old. He said, "You've got to hear this from my sister's record collection," and he put on "Fast Revolution" on the from the Beatles Blue album, and it was top volume. And when that kick drum, first hits, boom, and the scream, and then the kicks in, and our ears are bleeding, and we were from the volume, and it was just, I need to do this, right? And I always tell that story, but honestly, what was the next step? Well, I was also listening to Neil Young's first record. I was the just self-titled.
Before Down by the River. That's like the early. I love Neil Young. Yeah.
Yep. Jack Nietzsche was doing some arrangements, and it's kind of a weird. It's an esoteric record. I think the side 2 is all one single dribbling on kind of song, and it's very indulgent, and I loved it. But there was something primordial about it. I was listening to T-Rex, Electric Warrior at the time, which also has a sort of a caveman-like appeal to it, and what else? There were a number of albums like that were like, and the replacements too, Hometown Heroes, and I was just like, these people are making such simple, direct music. There is no reason why I can't get a 4-track and do this myself. This shouldn't be that difficult, and so it was just, you will it into existence because you're so enamored with your heroes.
Yeah, and it's another, like, kind of to go off of that, another question for you. Have you noticed a change in the times of how easy or more, like, we don't use 4-tracks as much, and all that in studio, and I could be, sorry, restart that. Restart the question. I'll cut this out. The question was, to go from off of that, is that being able to do everything digital now, and to be able to, do you use more digital, or do you tend to stick with the like wires of studio and still working in with like interfaces and stuff?
Right. I'm completely digital, and it just upsets me every time because I can smell it. I can smell Pro Tools, and I can hear it. And it's in everything, and it changes everybody's work mode, and I wish to God I would actually, if you listen to my the second song on my new album, it was cut to tape with no click track, and I think you can clearly hear it. Like, I think it's clear as a bell. Like, this band is playing together. There's a humanoid kind of vibe, and you can just hear it in the groove. It's actually, the groove is super kind of slow and organic and milky, but it somehow is a super peppy song. And I think, and I just can't ever listen to enough Beatles and going deep on their, recording the Beatles podcast or producing the Beatles podcast. Like, the things that, I'm only sleeping. It sounds that way because they were manipulating tape. It doesn't sound that way.
Cutting and actually physically doing this stuff before we could even dream of what they were doing. It's George Martin was insane too. Right. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and speeding up and slowing down, and across takes, and then recording the vocals faster and the percussion slower, and the background vocals fast, even slower, and you can't do. You're not prone to think like that when you're using Pro Tools, because one, it's limitless, and also it just um, I, I don't know, getting off topic a little bit. I look at
No
some of
problem.
my heroes, and I'm not going to name them. Some of my old heroes from the '70s and the '80s who are still making records, and man, they go in and they're using Pro Tools now, and it's just I blame it for them. If their music, if their current music is uninspired, and I'm not talking about Bruce Springsteen because he's blowing my mind lately. He
Yeah.
is like that guy's. I love him more than ever, and but a lot of my big heroes are just like they don't do well in an environment where sky's the limit. Those guys had specific skills. They were gods because they are gods because of this one or
Yeah.
two, three tricks that they did. And but you go in with Pro Tools and it's just lost.
That's why, like, I know, and
I
it's
don't
so,
know.
like, now you could pull out your phone and record. And I mean, I have a whole album coming up where I had a bunch of artists just record lines, and I'm pulling out my phone and I'm recording the guitar parts. So I think there's a distance too, and a lot more could be created. But the magic of, like, those, like you said, the signature sounds that these artists had, I think they're getting lost in translation nowadays, especially with everything being at the touch of a
Yep.
fingertips, instead of being like, well, I have to
Yep.
wait till I get
And
to the studio.
right, right. And but and I'm not hacking on it. I use it every
Yeah.
day, and hey, glorious things happen, and I love my new record, and it was mostly made in that realm. I'm not complaining, but I really would love to get back to a 4-track cassette deck, and I've got an album deep in my catalog that I released just a few years ago called Cassette Arcana, one word,
Ooh.
Cassette Arcana, and it's all my early 4-track cassette recordings, my best ones, and I just, to me, that stuff has so much ambiance
There's more
and
sound.
so much richness. Yeah,
Yeah.
and to me, it's like listening to a T-Rex album before that he got all big and rockin'. The
Mm.
earlier stuff like you know, da rida, la la la, whatever. So, oh, another big influential album was Donovan's Hurdy Gurdy Man. That album,
Ooh,
front to
fantastic
back,
album.
is unbelievable.
And for the
Yeah.
time
All right.
period to just bring out something like that, like no one was doing that, especially like Donovan you don't expect, and then all of a sudden, boom, and it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
one of my favorite psychedelic
Yeah.
albums of all time. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
you
It
say
really
your
is.
what was the favorite process of the whole album, Face the Sun, that Face the Sun's on? Which what was your favorite process of that album? Like working through it, did you have like a favorite song that you remember like going back to and going, I
Mm,
need to make sure this is perfect, or
yeah. The Invisible in Love is I co-wrote it with fellow power pop songwriter, the guy, Cliff Hillis, and I just love him. He's a master. He plays with a lot of other people, and co-writing with him is just a blast. We wrote it together, and he doesn't say no, man. He just pushes you as a partner to go to the next level. And we wrote this crazy song. It's like, I think it's close to 6 minutes long. The bridge is like its whole separate affair. And it slows up, it speeds down, it goes away, it comes back. Like the click, like mapping out the click track for that, and we did, was insane. It was all changing, like bar to bar. There were huge accelerations, huge cadenzas where there's no time, or fermatas and stuff. Anyway, if you listen to that song, to me it's a little like sonata. It's a symphonette, or something. And I had so much fun with that. I brought it into John Fields, and I'm like, dude, I want to hear percussion like Judy Blue Eyes. I want you to play bass like John. Why am I blanking? Led Zeppelin, hell, John Paul Jones.
yeah.
I want the drums to sound like freaking ELO. I want, and it just like it was just such a mishmash. I probably drove him nuts, but he just really laid it all out for me, and I had fun. And we put crazy. I got this insane piano player in there. We could barely hold a conversation, but he just like splooged all over it, and it was way too much, but I'm like, no, 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 I'm going to pull all the gems. This is amazing. And then John played more piano on top of it. So it was just this
Wave
incredible,
of sound.
me- yeah, just a big mess. But I wanted the mix to be transparent. So I wanted to be able to, you listen to Rubber Soul and every instrument is just
Mm.
crystal clear, right?
Yeah,
And
it's my
I
favorite
still
Beatles
wanted
album.
that. So yeah, me
Yeah.
too, man. Me
I just
too.
got a mono
Like
copy on
I,
a record, and I was like, "Ooh, finally!" And I got it real clean, and I finally got it. I was like, "I'm throwing that on the record player as soon as I get home." So I was like, "I love that's my favorite. It's my dad's favorite too, and it's just one of the best." And the
Ah,
sounds, everything that they could have done in mono, where we're doing it in stereo now, it's like, whoa,
oh God,
it's
just
insane.
kills, just murders.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so a big part of tape recording, going back to our previous topic, a big part of
Mhm.
tape recording is everything had existed with space around it. But in Pro Tools, for some reason, when you mix, nothing has space around it. It's all just density, and so it's really. I need to. I feel like when my records get mixed, I feel like I need to be in the room to just make sure that we aren't getting Pro Tool ears and like, oh, it
Yeah.
sounds so rich. Everything has to sound as rich as a chocolate cake, and it's like, no, it doesn't.
It could be
You
like
need.
I'm love like there's a lot of people I think that love that raw like too like the White Album for the Beatles being such garage rock rawness and when the Beatles were perfectional, there's both sides and I love that too with music
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. So I'm rambling on
No,
topic
it's
wise,
perfect.
but
That's what we
that's
that's what we're here for. We record all the
all
ramblings. I love it because it's to get inside and to talk about the process because behind every artist there is a process. It's not just hey it appears online or it appears on CD.
right.
There's a whole process to it. Have you ever what was your would you say is your best stage experience live?
Oh, that's almost my answer is almost disingenuous. It was always the last time I was on stage, because to me, I am. Listen, I have a
Hmm.
beautiful wife, a lovely marriage, incredible children who I love dearly. My parents are just wonderful people. I'm so blessed in this life. There's a lot
Yeah,
to love, and there's a lot of joy to find in that realm and friends out the wazoo just from touring for 20 years, thousands of friends literally,
that's amazing.
and but I'll tell you what brings me the most joy is when I'm up on stage and and we're improvising and the band that I'm leading doesn't quite know what's happening next,
Yes.
and you are in the moment. I mean, you and I, we spend our lives, like before this phone call, for instance, fixing technical problems.
Oh yeah.
So nose in the laptop, nose in the computer, plugins, bullshit, bullshit,
Oh
bullshit.
yeah.
And we only ever wanted to write songs, but instead now we know how to use these digital audio workstations, which took 1,000 hours of tears, trail of tears. We get so distracted by the stuff that we don't love but become good at, and it's just like, but being on stage
Hmm.
is
Oh
the
definitely.
one
Yeah.
place in the world where I can still be in. I'm not in the past, not 1 second. I'm not in the future, not 1 second.
It's
I
like
am.
time just freezes in the present. It's amazing. It's
Hmm.
like you could, and
Yep.
I love it. I love it.
Yep. And the things that come out of my mouth, I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I don't even know who that
I do
person
the
is.
same
So,
similar thing, and it's like another soul is speaking through you, where you let the music take a hold of you, and you just go with it. And I knew there was a connection when we were talking too, even through text. I was like music wise, because I've heard what you put down, and I'll send you some of my stuff as well. And I'm
oh, good.
like just all free verse because and there's stuff that's written, but I like work on phrasings and stuff. But it's just nice to hear like artists that do the same thing because sometimes you think you're alone. Like, does anybody else do this? But I love that being with the band and the pounding and them coming up with your own thing where the band is like, "What are you doing?" And then they just go with it and it's amazing.
Hmm. Ah, so good.
Oh
I'm glad you
yeah.
understand.
Oh,
Glad you
definitely.
understand.
Because there's two sides. You got the one side that's like, hey, I'm gonna write everything down, make sure everybody knows, and they're great too. That's why they make really good technical musicians like Zappa, for example,
Hmm.
with everything, and but he did a lot of improv too, and those guys had
Oh
to
yeah.
keep up with him, and it was
Hmm.
insane. But then you have artists like, where they just like I love the indie DIY garage rock bands that are just throwing whatever they want out at the door, and it's amazing sometimes. Like Guided by
Hmm.
Voices, one of the lo-fi bands, and stuff like that. That's like history in the making. When they were coming out, they were ahead of their time, and now it's like everybody's doing what they're doing. And it was like
Yeah.
when they came out, I was like, who are these people? And I love
Right.
that about it. And
Good
so, from
example.
all your 20 years of touring, have you played with anybody? I know you mentioned you played with Pete, who was just recently on our podcast too. You opened for him, was that correct?
Yeah, boy, I quickly, within seconds, became the biggest Pete Donnelly fan in the world. I mean, his music. his music is lovable. He's a lovable person, but then you start hearing the sound he puts to the songs that you're working on, and it's like, oh dear God, your music is as pure as your heart, you know. So I play his albums for pleasure, and yeah, we did something called a 3 hour tour, and I headed out to the East Coast and joined Cliff Hillis, who I mentioned earlier. This was 2014. And I said, hey, what about, I think Cliff and I put together the Donnelly Jim Boja ticket. And what if the four of us each did two of our songs and one cover, and that's 12 songs, and we'll just do a little 4 set mini tour. It might have been a three thing, New Jersey, New York, and Philly. And it was one of the most glorious nights of music of my life. And then we did a little solo set. We did a song in the round, trading songs for
awesome.
two each. Yeah, and it just the reviews from that show were insane, and the vibe was just crazy, crazy good. So I
That's my
can't wait to
dream.
collaborate. Can't wait to collaborate with those guys again.
Yeah, that's my dream. And that was cool that like when we had Pete on, I was able to ask him afterwards to do some voice lines, and he was like totally down for it. And I was like, wow, you're just like the nicest guy. It's incredible because I love the Figs, and I just got into Graham Parker and finding out that they were the backing band for a little bit. A lot of people found out about them, and then I also just I like that power pop vibe of like the raw Stones, the early Stones in them, and I love it. And I just love
Yep,
what they go with, and being a Posies fan too, and that all that mixed in, and I love that era of time with these guys. And
yep,
power pop is one of the coolest genres that I think more people need to find out about. More people need to like
yep.
dig deeper because this is a genre that I think needs a comeback. But there are people working really hard, like Michael Collins of the Finns. Recently,
Hmm.
Victory Lap had an album, and Power Pop in 2019. Then you got your album coming, here out, and it's now. It's now, and that's amazing. So I appreciate you making music because I love listening to it.
Oh, thank
No
you. And I've got
problem.
to I've got to look into that Collins record.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll
Yeah.
send you a link. It's
All
really
right.
good. I got it. He sent it to me earlier, so I'll pass it to your way. He's real cool. But we're gonna fade out with your song "Cut Your Groove." So tell us about that track.
Yeah, Cut Your Groove was a song that I wrote, speaking of the early Stones. Baby, 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 you're out of time. And I
Yeah.
just, that song, I was sailing, that song was vexing me. And then when I heard Chris Farley's version of it, it even vexed me harder because I think he outdid the Stones. It's a big kind of Northern soul kind of horn arrangement and big orchestra, Phil Spector kind of deal on Chris Farley's version. Yeah, gotta check it out. It's unbelievable.
Definitely.
And what happened was my dad, who's a big sailor at the time, he said, "Hey, bought a new yacht, and we got to bring it down to Mexico to get it repaired, and I need my sons on board with me. So let's sail from just the three of us from San Diego to
Oh wow.
Puerto Vallarta, and so it sounded so exciting, and it was January, and holy cow, it was the worst stormy, cold, awful weather. We couldn't raise a sail. We had to motor the whole way. We never spoke to each other because we're going in horrible shifts of manning the helm, and then the other two were
Oof.
down below, seasick. Like it was the worst experience, and the only thing I had musically was a cassette tape that I accidentally brought in my suitcase of
Oh,
uh, of of just some stuff I'd put together, and that song was on it, and I listened to it over and over again just to keep me up at night because I oftentimes had the early morning shift, and
yeah.
and it just vexed me. And when I got home, I'm like, I need to reverse engineer that song, and so I did it. I didn't want to corrupt the process, so I didn't learn what the chords. I don't have perfect pitch, and I don't.
Hmm.
I'm better now, but back then I didn't know what chords I was hearing. I'd have to go, pluck them out, and I'm like, I don't even want to know what the chords were. I don't even want to know what key it's in or what tempo it's in. I'm going to reverse engineer it as I sit here and wash the dishes. And I just started thinking of like, oh, cut your groove. I think I used that word in a conversation with a girlfriend or something at the time, and I'm like, okay, that's the title. And then it just so happened that I was in a band called the Conquerors, and we were sort of a '60s mod, time period thing. You can find us on Spotify. The Conquerors is a little
Yeah.
hard
Send me
to
some links.
find.
I'll put it down in the description of
Yeah,
the videos along with this
yeah.
Face the Sun album as well.
Yeah, it's material that you can hear through. It's easiest to find through searching for Willie Wisely. It's down in the also appeared on section.
Oh.
Because the Conquerors doesn't search very well. Everyone thinks the algorithms think it's a reggae group. Anyway, but I was in that group at the time, and I'm like, this is a perfect song for them. So I wrote it, and the guys dug it, and we played it. But then I wanted to re-record it in the full way that I envisioned it, and so that's what I did for this album. So it has nothing to do with Baby You're Out of Time, and but except maybe in terms of its longer chorus structure. But I wanted to reverse engineer it with all of the emotional benefits that the Stone song had. So there you go.
That's awesome. Well, guys, we'll cut right into that chat, the song right after this podcast. Thank you, Willie, for coming on. That was amazing to have you up here on the podcast, and we'll get this episode right up as soon as possible.
Oh, Jebb, it's so kind and generous of you to think of me and bring me on the show. I just
No problem.
deeply appreciate it. Oh, and before I forget, too, I am releasing the new album Face the Sun on CD through Cool Cat Music. I'm betting it's going to land in April of 2020 here. So it's only been released digitally, and there's going to be 7 bonus tracks on it. So I'm very excited to roll that out for everybody. I know there's still a lot of people that dig CDs, particularly in the power pop world, so it seemed really important.
I dig CDs. So guys, go definitely check this out. Link will be down below. Yeah, send me a link for that, definitely.
I never made a threat I can't keep. I didn't talk tough to hear myself speak. I said what I feel was real, and that's all.